In this video, I'm going to be discussing the evolution through the moon and sharing one person's real-life experience of how this process takes place, because it's one thing to read how how it works and how it's set up from a book, and then another thing to be able to correlate that to a person's lived experience and see how these two things come together. Before I share the story of the personal experience, I want to go over some background. So, this teaching of evolution through the moon is very old. It's been in astrology for a long time. There's the south node of the moon, which are old ways of emotionally relating to ourselves and our environment from a past life, which we then carry forward into our current life. Then, during our current life, our sense of self slowly changes over time in response to our life experiences. And as this process of change is taking place, we're utilizing the energies of our birth moon to explore and make sense of how this shifting sense of self is taking place. So Jeffrey Wolf Green, the founder of evolutionary astrology, teaches that the natal moon is a point of integration for the evolving ego, or the nodes of the moon. So you have the natal moon, the moon in the birth chart, and this is what the person, these energies of the natal moon is what the person is using to understand and make sense of how they are growing and changing, on a day-to-day basis over the course of their lifetime. From the south node energies, the old energies, into the integration of the new energies as represented by the north node placement of the moon. And the numbers here on this mandala, 18, 36, 56, and 74, are representative of the different nodal returns that a person will have during their lifetime. So roughly every 18 years, we have the opportunity to experience the energies of our nodes more strongly than we do at any other point in our life. So every 18 years, we have the opportunity to really focus on our evolving ego and how we're changing and growing in the sense of who we are internally. The person whose experiences I'll be sharing has south node energies of Capricorn and Aries. In evolutionary astrology, there are no houses. Every house is looked at as the energy that naturally occupies that house. So someone with south node and Capricorn in the first house is someone who has the south node energies of Capricorn and Aries. Then the natal moon is Virgo, Sagittarius, 9th house, north node, Cancer, Libra, or 7th house. A little history on this person. They come from a past of, not abusive per se, but quite a harsh childhood and upbringing where they were expected to, really grow up before their time. They had a lot of responsibility as a child, which you can often see with Capricorn South Node individuals. And from an early age, they learned that the best way to cope with their emotions, and we're talking about this because the moon has to do with our emotional body, the best way for them to do that was to bury all their emotions and stuff them down, which is a very Capricorn way of dealing with emotions in the negative sense. And because the person, because the person had this coping mechanism as a child, they learned that they couldn't really rely on other people to meet their emotional needs. And then you can see there they have the Aries the Aries energy and the South Node. So those two things go hand in hand. Aries keeps to itself, thinks about the self, because if, as a child, if no one else is thinking about you, you have to think about yourself, and you have to be somewhat narcissistic and somewhat of a loner and somewhat self-absorbed just to survive, that type of harsh, unforgiving environment that's not very nurturing. Because this person has Capricorn South Node, they also mainly identified with who they are externally. So career, status, work was very important for them because they felt that's the way that they could best give to other people themselves, because of the coping mechanism of having to shut off the emotions. They were totally disconnected from themselves and therefore everybody else. So there had to be some way to try to connect with other people, and that was through doing, which Capricorn is all about. So we fast forward to this person's childhood into their adulthood and their nodal return. So the first nodal return at the age of 18, they experienced their first real opening of their emotional body, as represented by North Node Cancer. And then during their second nodal return, they had, prior to their second nodal return, they had experiences that helped to activate their North Node energies of Cancer and Libra. So they had experiences that taught them how to be more identified with who they are from the inside versus the outside. So it wasn't so much about their career and their work and what they could provide for other people. It was, who am I really on the inside? And it was about connecting more to that lost self that they had learned how to disconnect from as a child, because the function in their family for them was about all these Capricorn things. Taking care of other people, making sure everybody was being responsible. As a child, having to do this for their siblings. So once they reached their second nodal return, had this, these experiences that forced them to no longer be able to relate themselves primarily to what they were doing through their work and through their career. They learned how to become less identified with that and start undoing that coping mechanism that they had learned as a child, and stop thinking so much that that they couldn't rely on anybody, that it was just they could only rely on themselves. Aries South Node. And then when they became more conscious and more connected with who they were on the inside, this in turn helped them to integrate the North Node energies of Libra as well, alongside Cancer, because in order to have relationships with other people, you have to first have a relationship to yourself. So that's how the Cancer Libra energies were connected, the North Node energies for this individual. So that's kind of the backstory of this person, and I want to get to a more concrete example of how they were utilizing the energies of their moon, Virgo, Sagittarius, to make this transition from the past energies to the future energies of their North Node during their nodal return. And this experience happened during their second nodal return. So during their second nodal return, the person, had already had the experiences that I mentioned that opened their emotional body and allowed them to become more connected with who they truly were on the inside. And during their nodal return, they started having a lot of, emotional things coming up from their childhood, emotional wounds. And they were also very interested in relationships. How can I make new relationships? How are my relationships doing? So this person, because they had that south node past of being such a loner and sticking to themselves, they decided that they wanted to make some new relationships with people of similar interest. So they went to different classes and just tried to put themselves out there more and see who might be around that what could potentially be a friend for them. And one day this person went to a class and struck up a conversation with an individual that they never met before. And as the person that we're talking about in this presentation was listening to the new person speak, they noticed that they were judging everything that this person said. So they were listening very carefully to, I guess, try and figure out this person. I think which is something that everybody does. We all want to get a sense of who we're talking to. That way we know if, they're someone that we might like to get to know better. Anyways, as the person was listening to this other person in their mind, thinking, well, this person is way too judgmental and this person is a little bit too brash for me, or, whatever the other ideas that they were having about this person, it suddenly dawned on them that, they were saying in their mind, well, this person is too judgmental, but they were in fact judging the person that was speaking as they were listening to them speak. So that it was very hypocritical. They were saying, oh, this person is too judgmental, but they were judging the person themselves. And that's where the natal Virgo moon comes in, because Virgo is very critical and very judgmental and very perfection seeking. So they want to find, anything that they do in life or any person that they have in their life, they want that thing or that person to be without flaw, because Virgo is about seeking that perfection. So anyways, we'll continue with the story. The person that the chart holder was speaking to reached out and said, let's connect and let's talk about this and this. And then the chart holder ended up messaging that person, getting in touch with them, and then they never responded back. So then the chart holder got very frustrated, and because they'd been trying for a while to establish new relationships and friendships at that point, because they were in their nodal return, they felt this desire and this need to go forward in the evolution of their emotional body, and their sense of self as indicated by their North Node Libra energy. So I guess this must have been the breaking point for that individual, because the next morning they were very frustrated and kind of had given up, I guess, on this North Node idea of relationships. And with that frustration came the instinct to go back to what they had already known, which is the South Node, Capricorn, first house. So they said, I've tried to make new friendships and new relationships, but it's just not working. So I'm just going to focus on my business. I'm going to focus on putting myself out there, all these status work-related Capricorn things that the person had already known and done, in their past. And then they were starting to go backwards in their evolution, everything in their frustration. They were like, screw it, I'm just going to focus on me and my work and my business. So after this experience, the person saw what was happening to them, and that they were in fact going backwards instead of forwards in their personal growth. So they kind of had to recalibrate and say, well, maybe I'm just going about my North Node energies in the wrong way. Maybe I need to think about the relationships that I already do have with my family and friends and try to strengthen those versus, doing the seemingly impossible, because obviously it wasn't working for them. So why keep trying to do something that's not working? And that's a sign that it's not meant to be. And after they did that, they were able to see, the cause of their frustration, number one, and how through their efforts being frustrated, there was this temptation and this tendency to slide back into old patterns of behavior and the old sense of who they were, because that is what they knew, what they'd known for so long and what was comfortable for them. And this experience also taught them a lot about some of their more unconscious parts of themselves, which is the moon. If you look at it, from that perspective, they never really realized how judgmental and how critical they were of other people. And, this allowed them to start not being so hard on themselves, because Virgo, the reason it's so critical and wants to seek perfection is because it does that first to itself, especially in the moon placement. And then because it acts that way towards itself, it, therefore believes that other people are doing the same thing to it, which can lead to social anxiety, which this person has struggled with their whole life. And then it also makes them, it makes them hold other people up to the same standards that they hold their self up to, this Virgo energy. That's what it does when it's in the moon, especially. But you can see that Virgo tendency in a lot of other planetary placements as well. So hopefully this gives you all something to think about, and maybe in your personal experience, you can look at your natal moon and see what energies are there and how you've evolved and grown over the course of your life in the sense of who you are and your self-identity, and how you've used your natal moon energies to help you in the integration from the South Node to the North Node energies.